Mindset is really a big part of my journey. And I say this all the time, and I truly believe it, but mindset is the single greatest asset that an entrepreneur has. And it's something we have to work on daily. We literally have to make it part of our daily routine. There's so much negative stimuli happening, and so just like you go to a chiropractor, if your back gets out of alignment, or we go to the gym and we work on our physical, what are we doing daily to work on our mental? Like, how are we getting positive mindset? How are we working on that? Because being an entrepreneur is nothing but navigating obstacles daily. It's just a, constant, like, putting out fires and figuring out this is the end. No, it's not the end. I'm going to make it in lemon into lemonade. But I would say, Maneet, this started for me really early when I was 16 years old. I had gone through a series of tragedies in high school, and they were really heartbreaking for me. And around that same time, my dad and mom got separated. And my dad came into my bedroom and he said, "Sweetie, I wish I was your age when I discovered this instead of the age of 40. And he handed me a cassette tape series of 10 tapes. And it was by Dr. Wayne Dyer, who's a motivational, inspirational speaker. And it said how to be a no limit person. And Maneet, I had never heard of this, thought of it, but I was so broken and sad and not in a good place that, I always say there's a hidden blessing in every situation in our life and all the dark times. My hidden blessing was I was so down and desperate. I was willing to listen to these cassette tapes of a middle-aged bald man with a bushy mustache, which most 16-year-old girls would have chucked that in the bottom of their closet. I put the tapes in and I started crying, and I thought to myself, I have spent 16 years in school being taught what to think, but no one has ever taught me how to think. And the light bulb went off for me that I am in control of how I think. I can process things in a way that either propels me forward or holds me back. And I became a lifelong student that day of mindset. And Wayne Dyer back then taught me about law of attraction, manifesting what you want, visualization, which have all been tools that I use to take on $1 billion industry with an endless ad budget with my $5,000. And I really think that's part of my secret weapon. Absolutely. I think it's critical for you to share the why behind what you're doing. People are really focused on the what, but consumers get very connected to the why. And so from the very beginning, I was like, here's my product, but let me tell you why I did it. And I kept staying very focused on the why. I always say, sell the problem you're solving, not the product. People are far more emotional about that. And my why also was about women, I feel very strongly that I was given this opportunity. I was born in the right place at the right time. I had nothing to do with those two things. I saw my mom and my grandmother's lack of options, and a lot of women still around the world today that don't have the option to fulfill their potential. And so that was a real strong why for me, was to make the most and to push myself as hard as I could in areas that scared me on behalf of the women that don't have that chance. And also, Maneet, when I stood on the floor 21 years ago in the manufacturing plant, I looked to my right and I looked to my left, and there was not a woman in the room. And I thought, I'm going to advocate for women through product. Like, somebody needs to be standing in this room going, but we're really uncomfortable, or it's digging, like I can't breathe, like it's not working, or it's leaving a big bulge on my thigh under my full slacks. So that became a passion for me, and staying connected to the why. People hear that, they're so much more invested than if they just hear, well, here's my product. It's a footless pantyhose. You can wear it with open-toed shoes and not have a panty line. That's important to kind of get it, but without telling them the why, you're missing a huge piece. So, I think the greatest fear is fear of failure for human beings. And when I sit and think about that, I'm like, what is it about the fear of failure? I also think it's connected to the fear of being embarrassed. There's things. And that really comes down to caring a lot about what other people think about you. And that's something I've been working on with mindset since I was 16. I'm a work in progress, but if there's anything I can recommend you guys work on is that, like really freeing yourself up from what other people think. So I will intentionally embarrass myself. I mean, if like a month goes by and I haven't done something embarrassing, I'm like, oh, I got to go embarrass myself, because I found that when I do that, it loses its power. And what I realize is when you make a mistake or you have a failure or you have an embarrassing moment, if you allow it to become a great story, you've got a great asset, because that's like a really wonderful way to connect with other human beings, other customers, is through that vulnerability that we share with each other. So I kind of see oops and failures as like gifts, like a gem, like, oh, good. Thank you for that. I'm going to use it and make someone else feel really good or not as alone, or I'll be able to connect in a way. And growing up, my dad taught my brother and me to fail. He encouraged us to fail. I would sit at the dinner table and my dad would say, Sarah, what have you failed at this week?
I remember that story. Yeah. And you do really put your money where your mouth is, where the embarrassing situations are concerned. Because you also had done stand-up comedy for a little bit, right? To kind of.
I did, which is absolutely terrifying. I mean, that is so terrifying. But, I used a lot of what I learned in stand-up comedy in my marketing. I think making somebody laugh or smile is so powerful. And I used humor as a secret weapon up against the billion-dollar companies for sure. And the best way, when people say, well, I'm not funny, it's like, well, be vulnerable, like, show your humanness. Like, humanness is going to connect you to people and make other people laugh and feel good more than anything, more than telling like the best joke, But my dad encouraged us to fail, and that was huge because he reframed my definition of failure. It didn't become about the outcome. It became about not trying. And I would come home and say, Dad, I failed at this. And he would high five me. And
wow. That wasn't my experience growing up.
Right. And so a lot of us are also afraid to fail because like, we don't want to disappoint parents. We don't want to disappoint, other loved ones. So that was very freeing that he did that for my brother and me. I started Spanx 21 years ago. I was like, everybody's so serious in business. Why is everything so serious? Do we have to act this serious? And so I remember thinking, I don't want to have to act serious to be taken seriously, And so I use playfulness. I'm silly. I'm just, willing to laugh at myself. At Spanx, back to the failure, we have things called oops meetings where we celebrate our oops, and I'll stand up in front of the company and tell them what I messed up at. Other people in the company are invited to share their oops. A lot of times we put theme songs with them. So we'll look
That's
up.
Hilarious.
They're hilarious. Like one of the things, so I made a whole list of the songs that went with it and presented one day all the things that we had not been doing right throughout the history of the company. But as far as being silly and playful, I in the marketing, I was like, I just want to talk to the consumer the way I would talk to my friends at dinner. And I felt 21 years ago, it was very different. I mean, everybody was, I felt like the industry in all industries acted like, if I don't act serious and act like the expert, you might not think I'm credible enough. And then therefore you won't buy my product. Well, I showed up and I'm like, I laminated a picture of my own butt in pants from Kinko's, and I'm standing at Neiman Marcus with like the fanciest women ever. And I'm holding this Kinko's laminated copy of my rear end. And I'm like, look what this can do for you. So, I mean, I just took a very different approach and I think it worked. I mean, Spanx never advertised for 16 years and we became a global household name. Right. And that's incredible with no advertising. And I think it's just because women felt so connected to it and shared it with other women. Well, I mean, I've had people copy me for the last 20 years. And my advice is I don't pay much attention to the competition at all. I mean, I'm an innovator and I've told the company, I wake up every day and there's innovators and there's imitators. And I'd far rather be an innovator. It's harder. It requires more work, but it's so much more rewarding. So the only time I would ever pay attention to the competition is through innovation. If I'm innovating, if the team and I have a new idea, for women, we would want to know, hey, does this already exist? You know, we
Mhm.
thought of this, but so I would check that market for that. You can also be checking the market for weaknesses, you know, like I'm a
Mhm.
consumer and what's not working about what's out there. And that's a
Mhm.
really fun place to try to create product and services. But I have not focused on the competition. I find that when you start to really pay attention to the competition, that's when things are probably not, they're probably going to start heading south for you as a company.
Mm.
Like those are little indicators. In 21 years, you know, we've had moments where the team started getting a little too preoccupied with that. And I'm like, this is a flag. What is this telling us about ourselves?
Right.
You know,
That's a good
and
insight.
I've had competition serve me really well. I had big companies knock me off very early on, and they spent $8 to $20 million on ad budgets that gave awareness for the product that I had just created. And my product was superior, so it ended up benefiting me.